The ANC says, as I mentioned, that the party will not entertain demands for Ramaphosa's removal as part of coalitions. Joining us now for more reaction on the result is political analyst Rebone Tau. Rebone, good to have you. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Tau, and good evening to the viewers.
So, Mbalula says Ramaphosa is the president of the ANC. If you come to us with demands that Ramaphosa must step down, that is not going to happen. Is he jumping the gun here before the NEC meets? Because we're already getting a sense that there are some in that NEC who are saying Ramaphosa should go because he failed to give them the numbers.
I think, Tambo, you know, when you look at the ANC, the signs have been there. There's been that decline, you know, over the years, and we can go back to even 2016, you know, when they lost the metros, you know, Johannesburg, Tshwane, and so forth, you know, and the same people, most of them who serve in that NEC around 2016 are still there today, and I think that they've not done a proper self-introspection as the leadership of the ANC from a structural point of view, even the quality of branches that they have, you know. And the ANC talks about renewal. They've been talking about renewal. I don't think that Ramaphosa, we can say all the problems that are there internally within the ANC are created by Ramaphosa. It is. They can remove Ramaphosa, but does not take away that the ANC is at its weakest as an organization, you know, and it will help them to do a true reflection. You know, I was talking to someone earlier on, and I was saying if the ANC is really serious, between now and 2026, they might lose metros if they don't really turn around or have a strategy to turn around the organization. And one of them is summoning all their mayors from the different district municipalities and so forth, and the metros. In terms of, there is no accountability in the ANC. People do as they please because it's always about a game of numbers. It's always about the conference and so forth, you know. And deployed cadres can do as they please because if I, Rebone Tau, have membership that I control, you know, because it's issues of members. So I'm able to get away. I'm not reprimanded. I'm not brought into account, you know. And we know that there's been lack of service delivery at local government. And you know, I was thinking, if you go back to 2012 and you listen to the then president at the time, Jacob Zuma, at the policy conference in 2012, you know, the ANC resolved on the importance of strengthening local government. And it's 12 years later, and we still see how there is lack of service delivery. The Minister of Cocta is not able to hold mayors accountable. You know, there's limitations, you know. But also the other thing is that the ANC needs to also look at the quality of its own cadres within the party. Are these people who are there to self-enrich themselves? We've seen the opulence even during the campaign trail, you know. We saw the Secretary General at some points in a G-Wagon, you know, and that car costs a lot, you know. We've seen also Dumanana when he was lambasted for those sneakers that he was wearing, you know. So, and you go to people who are poor and you expect that, and you still think that people are naive, you know, they don't see the lavish lifestyle that is lived by ANC cadres. So they have to also do an introspection on how they portray themselves in society. You know, what kind of a cadre do they need?
That would be the difficult introspection. But by and large, the easiest introspection would be who must account for this, right? Because as we speak, without even beginning to say anything, there are members of that NEC who've lost their seats in parliament. They're not going to be MPs. It's done. That's the 175 or so seats that they have, which means in that list, whoever had the hope of going in is now out. There are ministers who are not going to see blue lights again at this particular point, as it seems, because for the next 5 years, it has to be a coalition, a give and take, and there's going to be parties that are going to be competing for those positions. Are those people going to be sitting in that NEC on Tuesday thinking about themselves in these coalitions and therefore wanting a degree of accountability on Ramaphosa?
I think that will be very immature of them, you know, to want accountability on Ramaphosa. As I said, I mean, these people have been there in the National Executive Committee, so you don't talk about most of them who could say they were elected in 2022. Only there is this sizable number that was elected in 2022, but some of them were leading structures, whether at a provincial level, whether at a regional level. Yeah. They know, what has happened over the past 15 years in the organization, and the ANC will. The NEC, if they are serious, they'll have to really do a true reflection. But, I mean, people now have to think about their livelihood, rightfully as you said, because most of them, I don't know if they can survive like ordinary South Africans who would go out there and look for jobs like ordinary South Africans, because you find that some of them have never had a job interview. They're used to a game of numbers, of being elected into leadership, being on the list in terms of nomination. And now they will have to do a proper CV, put reference names and so forth, But there are people that obviously that are going to go in there also to just frustrate the process. Because the question is that who is the ANC going to move with in this coalition? And some would want to say, from an ideological point of view, we can't move with the DA, And I was saying to some people that, well, we talk about ideology, but what is the character of the ANC today? I don't know. Does it still represent the ANC that we know that was led by people like Tambo in the past, So the issue of ideology for me is not an issue at this present moment. The issue is about the country, We can't have a country that is not stable, We need a country that is stable. We need an economy that is going to grow. We need an economy that is going to be able to create jobs, because a lot of South Africans are suffering. And Tambo, I mean, for the past 5 years, if you have seen, I mean, things have been really tough. The petrol price going up. People are really living under very difficult conditions. A lot of people have lost job. You had COVID. You had July unrest. People also losing job during that time. So, unfortunately, I don't think that some of these ANC leaders are that matured to really look at themselves also. What role have they played individually as leaders of the ANC to create this mess, to not hold each other accountable, For an example, I mean, the Jacob Zuma that we see today, he was created by the ANC. Yeah. He was never held accountable for anything. They always would close ranks and condone a lot of things that were happening because people were preoccupied about saving themselves. As you talk about the ministerial post, so you can speak out in a meeting. You have to just be a praise singer, and while the organization is bleeding.
That accountability, let's talk about it. I mean, I'm sure you've read the Sunday papers. There are some who are saying it's going to be problematic for the ANC, or for some in the ANC, to merge with the DA. One, you've got a DA that wants accountability on Deputy President Paul Mashatile, right? If he wants to protect himself, he wouldn't want the ANC that merges with the DA that is going to turn around and want him prosecuted and sent to jail, right? You've got others within there. You've got Osifio Mapisa Nakula. We don't know how much more she's still in that ANC. That the DA definitely wants her prosecuted for her situation. You've got Fikile Mbalula, who's got things that are just constantly around him that he needs to clear himself out of all the time that are coming. So they'll be facing a DA that will constantly be accusing them of this, that, and that. Ramaphosa has got Pala himself. He's going to have to deal with a DA that is going to be accusing him of that, because I don't see DA tomorrow turning around and saying, now we're going to keep quiet about these things because we are in a coalition.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the things that, if you look at 2019, yes, there might have been a decline, where the ANC got around 57%. But President Ramaphosa at the time was very popular, and because of his slogan, fighting corruption and so forth, and I think a lot of people lost faith in him because he was indecisive. He did not hold his ministers accountable, He kept people in his cabinet who had been mentioned in the Zondo Commission report, and there were allegations on these people, and he just turned a blind eye because also factional politics, that he found himself in, trying to also, I think, run for second term, 2022 ANC conference. And you're right, as you say, that you have people who have been implicated. You're right that, we've been reading about the deputy president on the allegations, of the houses that he lives in and the money that he's been given to people and so forth, And that's where the ANC will also might say, let's close ranks. We can't go this route because we're literally handing ourselves over to be prosecuted, So those are some of the things. But unfortunately, that might also cost them again in 2026, So this process, I don't think that it needs people to be emotional, but it needs maturity, to really look deep and say, this is where the organization is. Yes, you speak about Nosiviwe. She's appearing on the 4th of this month, but she's not serving in the NEC of the NC. She was not on the list, so I think we'll just have to be monitoring, the court process, what happens, because the others are not charged. So, but yes, it's about also not bringing the party into disrepute, and which is said that people, even if they're not charged, but once you are tainted, you also need to reflect as a leader, and that's what the ANC lacks, where leaders will just continue and pretend like there's no allegations on them, and they don't even say, okay, let me clear my name and just step aside, and protect the image of the organization. And this is why the renewal process, I say, when I talk to some in the ANC, that I'm not feeling the renewal process, because the renewal process needs to show that things are done differently, and we have not seen it, and that's why the ANC is where it is today.
So we can talk about this. You speak of not being emotional and being mature and clear-headed as you're going into these. Is MK that clear-headed? Is MK that unemotional in how they are coming in to negotiate? Because they're going to be speaking to everybody.
Absolutely. Yesterday I was listening to the press briefing, which was very interesting, and hearing former President Jacob Zuma speak, and that the IEC must not announce these results, and that they don't want to be provoked, and I was asking myself, you don't want to be provoked, what does this mean? Are you going to go to the constitutional, the electoral court? We're going to see demonstrations in the streets, and for me, for someone who is a former head of state, for someone who did Burundi peace talks in the Great Lakes and so forth, for someone who has seen post-violence, post-elections, one of the journalists yesterday even asked about the issue of the slips, right? That the IEC puts out, in terms of the numbers. And for me, I was like, I've not heard MK being scientific and saying that we have done the numbers, we have tallied, and this is what, let's say, 6 million votes that we got based on what we received from the different VDs, So I'm not sure when they say they might have been cheated, what are the numbers? Because we need to be scientific. And this journalist was saying to them, and made a reference to Kenya, in 2013, when President Tambo declared those elections free and fair, but then the court overruled those elections, and they were supposed to be a rerun. But the MK still failed to answer, to say, but there were slips, because in Kenya the difference was there were no slips, so it was just a digital system, so that made that rerun to happen, So I feel that, for a party that's 5 months to get over 2 million votes, and you have the EFF that has always been radical,
three elections that could have contested.
And they declined in these elections, but they have accepted the outcomes, which shows also the maturity of the EFF, accepting these outcomes in spite of having a decline, of around 300,000, when you look at compared to 2019 when they got 1.8 million, at this time it's around 1.5 million, So and they did very well, MK in KwaZulu-Natal, which means that they are in a position to govern that province, and they were even asked, why do you still want to fight? Are you not looking at going into government, building the organization, but also governing, instead of wanting to drag, things. And it was interesting to see so many parties, I think 20 parties, parading themselves there, and seeing, I was laughing when I saw Colleen, saying Zuma is our father. Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
But also, which was very interesting for me, Al Jamaa signing that, being part of that group,
Yeah.
and thinking, but Al Jamaa in Johannesburg, the ANC put them and gave them the mayoral position.
Yeah.
If I was the ANC, actually, I was going to actually on Monday call for a special council meeting and remove these people, because why are you working against people that have made these elections very difficult for us? So I think it's very interesting.
Let's leave it there, Rebone. Much appreciated. All right.